Alright, I'm back with another Destiny 2 video. I'm currently waiting for servers to go back up for reset today, where we can start farming Hammerhead and Forbearance, which have some crazy rolls on them now that they're being reprised. But today I wanted to be more controversial and talk about something I wrote an article about yesterday, about how at this point in Destiny's lifespan, I would get more excited about further expansions of Onslaught than I would just getting a couple more strikes. And forever, it has been sort of the mantra of Destiny 2 PvE that we need more strikes. There's not enough strikes, and Bungie does not do strikes as often nearly as they need to, or as they used to. Well, that is true. I think things have sort of changed over time. And, you could argue, dungeons and raids are the best content in the game, but those have a cadence to them now where, like, we know when we're getting a dungeon, we know when we're getting a raid. Where strikes, it's like, who knows? Are there 4 or 5 like Forsaken? Are there 1? Like, are there 2? Do they suck? Are they good? I just don't think that they are quite the pinnacle of, like, sort of, low, mid, high tier PvE content. And what we've seen instead is like the shift toward Battlegrounds, these seasonal Battlegrounds. We had a couple seasons of those, and those are now both in the Strike playlist and as GMs. I originally liked Battlegrounds quite a bit, not because they were necessarily well structured, but because they were some of the first activities Destiny did where they actually did mob density at a level it felt like it should be. That was the thing I far and away liked the most about them, whereas Strikes, they did improve some of these over time, but there are these kind of long segments where there's just really barely any enemies. And then, GMs is not, for normal Strikes, it's not really about like the amount of enemies per se. It's like how much damage things do. It's like your champion stunning rotation and things. And then for Battlegrounds being turned into GMs, like those final rooms are just sort of exhausting. Like, I don't really find those terribly fun for really any level of those strikes, and I know there's a lot of complaints about them as GMs. And I think Onslaught is just a more compelling activity in general, and it would probably require less work to update and expand. Strikes are like enormously costly, time-consuming content, because some of it you might be using part of a patrol zone, but like you have to build so many new spaces out, like all these new encounters types and things like this. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it sucks. But I just don't think, I think Strikes have sort of been left behind in terms of both design, how fun they are to play and farm, and what you can actually farm within them. And then Onslaught kind of makes that very clear, where Onslaught has all the mob density of the Battlegrounds that I like, without the structure and sort of obnoxiousness of Battlegrounds. I think they are able to reward a diverse array of builds, unlike some of the higher end Strikes, which are mostly focused on purely just champion stuff. Legend Onslaught, there's obviously a little less flexibility there. But at the higher ends of Legend, it's still a challenge. It's maybe not GM level, but then you have the GM level people trying to do solos and duos and stuff like that. So I think there is still a good amount of challenge there. These are way more rewarding of activities. I mean, right now we have the Brave Arsenal, which is going to end up being 12 weapons. You get how many weapons a run? Like 5-6 weapons a run, plus tokens to get more weapons, as opposed to maybe getting one weekly reward of a specific weapon. Better for target farming, but then you have a bunch of weeks where the reward is not anything you remotely care about. It's not like a pool of all the weapons that are offered for Nightfalls. It's just whatever the week is. Like, if it's something you really want, great. If it's double rewards, oh, even better. But like, I don't think it's anywhere the same level of rewards or even interest in the rewards as what we're seeing here. Talking a little bit how Onslaught could expand, the most obvious thing is more maps for it. I think there are a number of existing places you could do more maps for. I think there's obviously more Crucible maps this could work on. Perhaps more patrol spaces, even though I think Moth Yards is definitely the worst one that they have. I saw someone say the opening of Ghosts of the Deep would make a really good Onslaught map because of the way it's structured, the choke points, stuff like that. So you could be a little innovative when it comes to things like that. Obviously, I think a great thing to do would be make maps specifically designed for Onslaught rather than trying to take a mode and jam it into something it was never meant for. Even if that has worked, I think it's still something worth investing in. Also, we only have 2 enemy factions right now. That leaves the opportunity obviously open for Cabal, Scorn, Vex. I said not Taken because I hate Taken. The new Dread faction. I think this was just a time thing. Like, it's amazing they got this out at all. So I'm not shocked that they only really formatted it for 2 enemy races. But I think that this is something that could be expanded on in the future. We can also talk about defenses. We've started with 3 defenses, say 1.5 of which are actually good. As Onslaught, progressed and grew, you could easily put in different types of defenses, different types for different maps, kind of mix and match more, boost their effectiveness in some ways, perhaps a little more, so it's less just build a billion shacks, holograms. So there's opportunities for expansion there. Rewards. I think we all have our favorite weapons that did not return with this update. There's easily 2 dozen more that they could have pulled from either weapons that are fully vaulted or weapons that are so old they have like shit perks, even if we used to love them. There's plenty more. This could be a way to bring back old weapons without being like, these old weapons are part of seasonal farming. Like, it could be something more compelling than that. And I just have to think, like, would I rather play a new 12-minute strike of questionable quality, 100 times, be it in the strike playlist or be it as a nightfall, or would I rather play more Onslaught, more, an expanded version of it, different maps, different enemies, increased rewards? I know what I would think is more compelling at that point. And I'm not saying like do no strikes, like do just abandon the idea of strikes. Like, no, you could still make strikes, and I'd hope you could do both at some point. But I think Bungie should recognize that Onslaught is one of the more compelling activities they've ever made. I think it's up there with, Menagerie and I would say the Coil. The main problem with the Coil is that, eventually you just sort of have a reason to stop running it. Mainly because of crafting. Once you get those crafted rolls, there's no point in doing it, which is something Onslaught does not have, obviously. I think there's some things that Onslaught does wrong. I really hate the spark running part. I think it artificially extends playtime in a way that is not especially interesting. There are, different aspects of it that I think could be improved. They got to fix the teleporting enemies that just show up on top of the ADU. It happens way too frequently. But again, this is like the 1.0 version of this, and I hope that we would have 2.0, 3.0 versions of this. That said, I don't have a ton of faith this is going to happen. Why? Because this is a free activity, and Bungie always finds it very difficult to invest too much into free activities, despite Destiny 2 being an allegedly free-to-play game. We had a very similar conversation to this about Dares of Eternity, which was introduced as a free mid-season update when, was it Beyond Light got delayed? Was it that year? Really kind of neat concept, this goofy game show idea with interesting segments that had like sort of different mission objectives based on what enemy race you were fighting, 3 different bosses. It was a good activity. I don't know if it's like series best, but it was very good, and it's still good. And the idea then was like, oh, it'd be cool if they kept expanding on this with like different games and like different bosses, and like they could just keep growing this. They never did. They never did anything else with that. They ended up putting different weapons in there, like a place to farm weapons you couldn't get anywhere else now. I think they had stuff like, was Chroma Rush in there and things like old seasonal weapons. But not really the same level of what we're talking about here. And if they didn't invest more in that, am I super confident they're going to invest more in Onslaught, even if we know Onslaught is sticking around when it's free, and something like Strikes come in paid expansions, and something like Gambit has never been touched for years, which is free, and we had to drag them kicking and screaming into making more PvP maps of any substance after years and years and years. No, I don't have a ton of faith in that. I would argue the counter to this is that Onslaught is a very good activity in terms of like being probably the best free thing that the game offers. I would say, there's some dungeons like Prophecy and stuff that are free that I think are compelling offerings, but like this is so accessible. Like there's, the playlist format, which is really easy, but it sort of introduces you to the concept that would be good for brand new players. 50 wave on normal for like an average player is doable with randoms. You're sort of gambling on whether people will leave or you'll finish, or you might wipe to some random spawn on the ADU or something. So it's not a guarantee, but it's sort of a mid-level where I would say it's certainly less hard than some of the higher end Nightfalls, but it's challenging enough to be interesting. And like, have you friggin' played the Strike playlist? Like the normal Strike playlist? Like it's just so lame. And like, maybe it's just purely for new players at this point, but like, it's just so annoying. And then the alternative is Nightfalls, which you're only playing one Nightfall over and over and over again. It is overwhelmingly focused on champion loadouts, and it's just, I don't think it's nearly as fun or interesting as what we're seeing from Onslaught. So I would argue continued investment in Onslaught would be good for new player onboarding if they're not going to do things like unsunset the entire Red War campaign, as we head into many more years of Destiny here. I'm guessing they're going to try and make, whatever, if there is an expansion after this, sort of a reset point for people, but that is certainly not going to be free. So I think Onslaught can serve an important role as a really compelling free activity for players who just want to get in and experience some level of Destiny's gunplay, Destiny build crafting, because it's such a diverse array of things you can at least attempt to use and experiment with there. And I find this more compelling than Strikes in their current form, many of which have not been updated in forever, many of which are now Battlegrounds, they have good mob density and not a whole lot of other good qualities. And I find them more compelling than higher end Nightfalls, which are a type of challenge, but I don't think they're that interesting, especially as we moved into like GM Battlegrounds and stuff, which are just sort of annoying. So that's my take on why I like Onslaught a lot more than Strikes, and I would be more excited to see more Onslaught expansion than I would new Strikes, even if I'm not saying to banish Strikes from the face of the earth. Something has occurred to me where like I feel like legendary campaign missions practically are on a similar level to some Strikes now, like because of the way they did difficulty with those, because of the length of them now. Like a lot of those do sort of feel like their own Strikes. Ones you can obviously run solo a bit easier, but like, I don't know, Strikes themselves are just starting to feel kind of dated as an evolutionary concept, because I just don't think we've seen that much expansion. Like, we got the Vex Network one, and like, is that really anyone's favorite thing? Like, did we get that and we're like, oh my god, this Vex Network strike, whatever the hell it's called? I don't see that. Nor do I think anyone has been super excited about the influx of Battlegrounds and them being inserted into higher end Nightfalls. So that's my case. After this article, I realized that some people think this is an unpopular take and will disagree with me. I do not expect this to get the most thumbs up I've ever seen. I know that like more Strikes has been this like holy doctrine of Destiny forever, and I have fully been in that camp before. I just think activities have evolved to the point where there are much more interesting activities than Strikes, some of which are content vaulted seasonal things. Like we're going to lose the coil, which I think is a shame, because I'd rather just have the coil continue in some form with like different, better rewards and, some tweaks, but that's not going to happen. But Onslaught being this big new thing, being something that can use existing content to a certain extent, and a good way to reprise weapons without people being super pissed about it, like injecting them into paid seasonal content. There's a lot going for it. So that's my case. Agree, disagree, let me know in the comments. And in 2 hours here, I will start farming my insane hammerhead with all those crazy rolls. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.